Hello, dear friends. David Ostriker here in Karmiel. Sunny and warm. Getting very hot, actually. It changes quickly, right? We're up to Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Sabbath, the long Shabbos, the Shabbos of greatness. It's also Shabbos Metzora, which is connected to Tazria Metzora. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Tazria Metzora just before Pesach, but today I want to talk about Shabbat HaGadol. It's a very kind of mysterious thing. It's called the Great Shabbos, and it's the Shabbos that comes before Pesach. Rashi and many of the medieval commentators say it's called the Great Shabbos, the long Shabbos, because it's a Shabbos when the rabbi talks for so much time that it feels like the day is going on forever. Now, with some of us, that can happen in a 10-minute vort. But usually this Shabbos is the Shabbos when the rabbi gives a very long sermon, a very long Devar Torah, explaining the details of the complex laws of Pesach, of Chametz, of the destruction of Chametz, of the meaning of Chametz, of the meaning of Matzah, of Moror, of the Paschal Lamb, the Paschal Sacrifice, Pesach, Korban Pesach. And it goes on for quite a long time. And he's preparing the people for this special event that's coming. And that's why it's called the Great Shabbos? Because people are exhausted by the rabbi's sermon? So says Rashi. He has other reasons given too, right? Rabbi Norman Lamb speaks about the basis of an idea that comes from the Torah. The Torah was one of the great minds that was really the source of what later became the Halachic Shulchan Aruch, the assortment of grounded Jewish laws, code of Jewish laws. The Torah says that this was a day, this Shabbos HaGadol was a day of greatness because a great miracle happened. What was the miracle? Well, the Torah tells us that on the 10th day of the first month, that it would be Nisan, that on this day, the Jews bought and tied to their bedposts a lamb. Every household did so, right? The Egyptians noticed this was going on, and they came and asked, "What's with the lamb?" And they said, "Oh, the lamb is very important. We're tying it to our bedposts, and on the night before we leave Egypt, which is the night, by the way, of the destruction of the firstborn, we're going to slaughter the lamb and we're going to eat it." Now, there were a lot of things troubling to the Egyptians in that statement. Let's look at it. The plague of the firstborn? What's that about? And so we're told that this actually caused a civil war in Pharaoh's world. That the firstborn of each family came to Paro and they said, "Paro, the God of the Jews is going to cause one final plague, which is going to kill all the firstborn. And by the way, that includes you and your firstborn child. You have to let them go today, now, before that happens." Pharaoh said no. A civil war ensued between the firstborn and the forces of Pharaoh, and many very evil people who had been very, very harsh to the Jews were destroyed at this event. Okay, now that's interesting, and it's a powerful story. How does it compare to the splitting of the sea or the other 10 plagues? It doesn't seem like it's a great miracle. It seems like it's an important one. Came about. The other thing was that they made this statement that they're going to sacrifice these lambs, right? Now, the lamb was a deity to the Egyptians. So the Jews, their former slaves, have the chutzpah to kill their gods? What is that about? Right? Shabbos HaGadol, Shabbos of the greatness, right? Gadol also can mean an adult, right? In Hebrew, katan usually means a child, and a gadol is an adult. Hang on for a second, my notes. and an adult is a gadol. But halakhically, it's very interesting. A gadol is defined not simply by age. Well, he became 13, bar mitzvah, she became bat mitzvah, now they're adults. No. A katan is somebody who eats from the table of others because he can't support himself. And a gadol, halakhically, is somebody who can support himself and those who eat at his table. Slaves of Adam are by definition katanim. They eat at the pleasure of their masters. On this day, we became gadolim. We became gadol. We told the Egyptians how it was going to be. We're going to sacrifice these lambs and we're going to eat them. And one of the miracles, says Rashi, was that they were very upset, but they kept silent. Were they in shock? Were they intimidated? We don't know. But they kept silent. And so it went. So this idea of becoming a gadol is actually a great miracle. Right? And it's one that was one of character of the Jewish people. They had been enslaved bitterly for a very long time. And the mentality of slaves doesn't go away quickly. And yet at this moment, they took on the mentality of a gadol, of somebody who is responsible for themselves. And so it is that this day had tremendous significance. Let me tell you something else about this day in Jewish history. You know, there are no coincidences. I'll just read you this note. This comes from H.com. What happened on this day? On this date, in 1915, more than 100 years ago, the Zion Mule Corps, a Jewish militia, was formed by Zev Jabotinsky. This was in the midst of the Great War, the First World War. Zev Jabotinsky had proposed that Jewish volunteers should fight to liberate Palestine from the Turks, the Ottomans. But the British resisted the idea of Jewish soldiers on a Palestine front. And so instead, Jabotinsky established the Zion Mule Corps. Shabbat Shalom. It was made up of 650 members who were commanded by a one-armed fighter, Yosef Trumpeldor. It was essentially the first organized Jewish fighting force since Roman times, since the destruction of the temple and the exile that continued until 1947. It was the precursor of the IDF. Jabotinsky has said, now is a time for us to be Gedolim, not Katanim. This was on this day. I want to leave you with a thought. I know I'm doing a lot of reading today. My wife tells me I should talk and not read. But I'm doing a little bit of reading today because it's important. Norman Lamb finishes his Devar Torah on this day in a very interesting way. He says, Judaism cannot survive with pettiness of spirit and the immaturity of Jewish mindlessness. If we return to Torah and tradition, we can ourselves forge a nes gadol, a great miracle. If heaven forbid we do not, we must face and expect a terrible failure as a katnut, as a little one. On Shabbat HaGadol, we strive for the experience of Yom Hashem HaGadol, and by once again becoming a goy gadol, a nation, a great nation, We will be able to bequeath to our children and our children's children Rekush Gadol, a heritage of authentic greatness. V'hashiv lev avot al banim v'lev al banim al avotam. And the Lord shall cause the heart of the fathers to return to the sons, and the heart of the sons to their father. These are his thoughts at this time. He wrote this in the 1950s about a young Israel that had survived the initial wars of independence, Suez. I think Suez. Certainly not the Six-Day War or the miracles. It was struggling. And he's telling us what is required for us to be a Goy Gadol, a great nation. And in many ways we have become it. But the job is not finished. And I think we need to pause, whether the Jew is in Israel or the Jew is in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, and as part of the Jewish nation. Shabbat HaGadol is a good day to remind ourselves that we are Gedolim. We are not dependent on another nation. We are not dependent on masters. We are our own masters. And this causes us to make good choices. Let's do so. Pesach is very much about that. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat HaGadol HaMivorach. David Ostriker, here in Karmiel.